Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Chicanery. We are your hosts. I'm Danny, and my wonderful co-host JT.
Hello again.
And so this episode, we are getting into Petit and which is the final round of the IMSA WeatherTech Championship season, and thusly a bit of a recap of the season. Um, so I suppose without further ado, we should probably jump right into it. And of course, as has very much become tradition around these parts, um, this would not be an episode of news on this, or an episode of this podcast, rather, if we didn't have news. And kicking off the first bit is that Richard Westbrook announced his retirement, which I don't know about you, but I very much did not have that on my bingo card.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty unexpected, but then again, like he is pretty like he's getting up there in age. And then like I don't know, he said when they interviewed him like on the broadcast that he feels like he's pretty much accomplished everything that he possibly could accomplish. So I mean, I guess it makes sense. I mean, everybody will be sad to see him like not in any racing anymore, but I don't know, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely got a point. I mean, Richard will be 50 next year, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he's not a young man. But he's been just such a fixture in various different sort of GT categories over the last oh, 20 years at this point, almost 25, that he's just kind of always there. I feel very similarly about like Scott Dixon in IndyCar. He's just kind of always been around. So does it make perfect sense? Of course it does. Is it still like a holy crap moment that he's announced his retirement? Yes. Um, so, so yeah, so certainly, congratulations, much love, and good night. Um, is certainly how I feel about that. But then moving on, the 01 Cadillac was painted pink for breast cancer awareness. And, I know it's basically a special livery, but I thought the car looked great, and it's almost a bummer that we don't have a permanently pink Cadillac floating around.
Yeah, just I mean, I guess everybody saw it. I think it was just a display car or show car at like the Coda race for WEC, and everybody liked it then. Like that was when everybody was pretty infatuated with it. Which I mean, who wouldn't? It's a pink car, and everybody seems to like pink cars, barring I don't know one particular dude on Twitter who felt a certain way about having pink race cars, but other than that, other than him, everybody seems to like pink cars. So, everybody liked it. And it was great to finally see that it was actually on track because I'm like, why not? And it felt like, it felt great too since it was the last race for this car anyway. So it's like, might as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is a gorgeous car because, yeah, I love me some pink race cars. And I think the Cadillac looks incredible. But, yes, this is a very good send off for the 01.
It's not even pink. Like, it looks like it was hot pink in a lot of pictures online of it. But then, like, IRL, I think it was more magenta than actually like hot pink. Like I thought it was gonna look more like the Iron Dames car, but it's like magenta actually, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, there's a lot more, seeing the photos from the Petit Le Mans weekend. Yeah, there's a lot more blue in that color than I had initially expected, which I don't mind. If you're gonna do pink, that's my, preferred shade. Large air quotes there. Um, but yeah, but overall, I think the car looked fabulous. And is a heck of a send off. But moving on, Paul Miller Racing announced that they are expanding to two, count them, two GTD Pro entries next season. I didn't really, perused the statement, pretty quickly. I mean, Paul Miller is, all things considered, been pretty successful in the pretty open season that feels like GTD Pro, particularly. Um, but apparently they can support 2 entries, so means more cars, so my brain says more better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, honestly, I would have considered them to be, I don't know, a team. Like, because I felt like that they possibly could have been a team that would have been a replacement for RLL with running the BMW prototype program on like at least the North American side. Because I felt like they would probably be either them or Turner Motorsports would probably been a good option because they have they're pretty successful, at least in like the GT programs they have, and like they seem to be more competent. I mean, sure, RLL got their win in their 1-2 lockout at Indy, but I'm still very like I don't know, their competency in my opinion is still very questionable.
Yeah, that's fair. Certainly as for who would take over. I have a slight preference towards Turner over Paul Miller racing. Turner's been around for freaking ever, and I actually need to go back and look. But for a long time, Bill Auberlin, who was actually an ex BMW factory driver from that would have been the very early aughts. I do believe he drove the E46 M3. Um, and I think the E92 as well, if I remember correctly. Um, but he
Everybody
is
was
one.
theorizing that he possibly could be one of the drivers on the other lineup, or at least on like I think the cars are like 1 in 48. So at least
Mhm.
on like the 48, possibly. I don't to be honest, I have no clue who could be on the 48 lineup. I mean, there's obviously like Neil Verhagen and Madison Snow. That's for like the one. Those are usually the typical drivers that they have, at least for most of the season. And then on like enduro rounds or like the Rolex 24, like they'll bring in like somebody else. Um, but I don't know. BMW has such a like massive pool of factory drivers, so it's like it could be anybody, honestly.
Yeah, it really could. Um, but certainly if he stepped up because he's just running with Turner in a normal GTD. If he had stepped back up to pro, that could be kind of fun. And speaking of BMW driver pool things, Nick Yellowly is exiting BMW, and he'll be joining the reborn Meyer Shank effort with Ringe Vendezande. So that's a thing.
Yeah, it got announced like yesterday before like I had finished completing all the notes, and I'm like, yeah, like I'm kind of sad that it happened. Like I don't know, it fell into place like very quickly, which to be honest was not that shocking because it was pretty like if as far as it goes for like if you're trying to like give yourself points on like silly season predictions or driver lineup predictions, that was pretty much like a gimme, like a free points because it was pretty obvious. Like, or at least if you had been paying attention and you had been like seeing like the writing was on the wall pretty much, I felt like because even before we got to the end of the season, it was already theorized or there were rumors that somebody from BMW's lineup was gonna be leaving. Um, at that point, it just was a question of who was it gonna be, and right now it's Yellowly and then Van der Zan, obviously because the O1 Chip Ganassi is not they're not continuing in IMSA at least for now. They might come back with another program, but since they're not continuing, obviously they have to go somewhere. And it was like, yeah, that makes sense. So it was a pretty like I don't know, worst kept secret part two.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, not super surprised by really any of this. So we'll just kind of have to see. It's the biggest thing is it's just going to be wild for Daytona next year. Seeing Yellowly's name on the position board graphic on the broadcast, and my brain going, "Oh yeah, hey wait, that's not a BMW."
I'm sure
um,
he'll be like low key celebrating because the BMWs are always so incredibly horrendously slow at Daytona. So I mean, shit, I'd be like doing jumping jacks in place, I would literally be jumping up and down and celebrating and blowing confetti horns at the fact that I don't have to drive a dog slow car at Daytona anymore at one of the biggest races on the planet.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Yeah,
I
it's yeah.
actually have a shot to win again.
Yeah, overall, this was probably a net positive for Yellowly, relative to where he's been the last few years. But it's an excellent segue because all of the people are interested in the 2025 Rolex 24, because we've got a couple new teams. We've got potentially an additional new car, and we'll get to that in a second. And new manufacturer, because is the Aston Martin GTP going to be ready for this coming season?
We don't know. That's
I
still up in the air, I would say, because we went over that, I guess, like, I don't know what episode it was, but at that point in time, that was like July. And there was doubt at that point in time whether or not the car was going to be ready in time for the Rolex 24. So, it's now October, or at least mid-October. October's been flying by. It's almost November. And I think soon they'll be testing at Daytona, which happens, I don't know, either November or December. So like for all intents and purposes, they could be at the testing. Like I wouldn't be shocked if they were at testing, but like at the race, I don't know. I guess it's possibly still like doubtful whether or not that car will actually be there. I mean, last I heard, I haven't really seen anything else regarding whether or not it was a for certain, yes, we'll be at the Rolex 24 in January, or no, we won't. So as far as it goes for regarding the Valkyrie, I don't know.
Yeah, and that was part of why I was asking, is because yes, we had talked about it a little bit, and we had come to a verdict inconclusive for if Aston Martin and Heart of Racing were going to be around, available, etc., for Daytona. And I, like you said, just haven't heard anything. We already know Genesis is until what, 2026, 2027, something like that. So still a fair ways down the line. But it's just you've got a whole boatload of interested new parties that are all looking to join IMSA, which is super cool. But it means that the 2025 Rolex 24 is going to be massive.
Well, I mean, it's great. It's just going to be a massive party like it is all the time. I mean, barring, unfortunately, the negative of this is going to be the fact that the more cars equals more full course yellows by default. So, like, which is part of the reason why I think the Indianapolis endurance race this past month was so chaotic, was because the car count was pretty high, and it wasn't as high as it was last year because last year it was a sprint race. But obviously there's going to be like a lot of full course yellows, and you know what, if you have typical like suspects like Sean Creech Motorsports, I mean, they haven't been at the
God.
past few races, but if there's more shenanigans and teams like that, then yeah, it's safe to say, I don't know, we could be dealing with another situation like Le Mans, like back in 2023, where it was like, I don't know, I swear, like 6 hours of full course yellows, or even this year where it was a 4 hour long full course yellow or 4 hour long safety car because of darkness and rain.
Yeah, it was wild. Yeah, and it's funny because I was actually out and about, and I had convinced the crowd to let me watch Le Mans just for it to be full course yellow, like the whole time I was there. It was kind of a bummer. But yes, no, looking at the perspective amount of entries for the Rolex 24, it reminds me of that scene. It was Army of the Ghosts, that Doctor Who episode where he's like, should we leave it alone? Should we play it safe? Nah, let's make it bigger. And that's basically what everybody has collectively done for Daytona. Because just to run through a little bit, is that DXDT Racing. They primarily hang out in the GT World Challenge Series. It's sponsored by Fanatec now, isn't it? Um,
Yeah, it's a Fanatec, like GT World Challenge America, I think is where they're usually at.
yeah, it was Pirelli a million years ago, so my brain had to
I mean, I
almost
think
not.
they still use Pirelli tires or something, but I don't.
Yeah, but Pirelli was the title sponsor, and so my brain still kind of defaults to that because it is perpetually about 10 years behind. Um, but yes, they are joining GTD with a Corvette. Um, so that's neat. Given that AWA is kind of all overshot, because are they coming back? Because I know one of the guys, I think technically one of the owners, had that very pissy Instagram post.
Rage quit.
Yeah, selling the Corvette, but
Hold, please. I will go check and see if they're on the entry list for next year.
yes, need some holding music here. But but
You know,
yes.
while I'm looking for that, I would like to see more like NASCAR drivers do the Rolex 24 because there weren't that many. I don't even know if there were any this year in the main race. There were people like Bubba Wallace did like I think Michelin Pilot Challenge,
Hmm.
and then some other people. I think last year it might have been like Zane Smith and like Haley Deegan did like the Mustang thing or something, or they were driving Mustangs or something at some point. I don't remember when it was, but and then
But
Austin Cindric I think was also in it last year.
hmm but yeah, no, I mean, we talk about, the Rolex 24 being one of the biggest crossover events that you'll find in motorsports because you've got genuinely a little bit of everybody from all sorts of racing backgrounds and disciplines. And, we've had in previous years, we've had IndyCar guys, Newgarden, Castroneves, Montoya's been there, who actually, I mean, Montoya's driven just about everything with four wheels. Then, we've had Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott. Actually, I want to say even Alex Bowman might have done something many moons ago. But yeah, it'd be cool to get some NASCAR guys back at the Daytona 24 this year.
So as far as it goes for AWA racing, they have one entry, I think it looks like, for 2025, the 13.
Okay, well, there you go. So now with this, you will have one, two, five Corvettes.
I mean, AWA is probably the most obscure team with the Corvette. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I just forget they're even in the race half the time because it's either like I don't know, they're just like way at the back of the field all the time, or it's a case of, well, we only, I think it was what, Sebring, where that car completed like a grand total of like one or two laps before it just broke. So, I mean, unless, you know, it doesn't like randomly break on them like it has been the past few races, or is not just horrendously slow, I mean, they're probably just going to be a back marker.
Yeah, probably. And correction, 4 Corvettes, not 5, because DXDT, they're only bringing 1. They're not bringing both cars. Um, but yeah, no, it would be neat, and that's I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum this year, so I'll try really hard to not beat that particular dead horse. But the Corvette has been a unique combination of unreliable and slow. Uh, um, so it seems like if it gets one lap kind of left on its own, like during quali, it seems like just one lap pace is fine, but over the course of a stint, not so much. So if there may be some improvements in the off season, then not only the main mothership Corvette racing team, but additionally the basically the satellite teams, AWA, DXDT.
Is that
Perhaps
not is the Corvette new this year? Isn't it like a new car?
yes, it is.
So then maybe some of the issues that are happening we've seen this year are a result of it just being a new car, and there's still like gremlins and stuff that they have not like worked out. So hopefully next season it should be a little bit smoother.
That would be cool. I would certainly like that. And this is a genuine question. So certainly if somebody somewhere listening has the answer, I would love to know. My brain says that given that I guess the basic chassis in the form of just the C8 platform generally has been around for a while, I understand the old um GTE, GT2 for want of a better phrase, versus the modern kind of GTD Pro Regs, which is effectively just GT3. I realize that it's different, different enough to necessitate a new car, new. But my question is, how different is the GT3R from the old C8R? I guess that is the question that I have. That this car would be this slow and this unreliable in its first year. So I don't know, but tangentially related to Corvettes, and again, a thing very much not on my bingo card. Pratt Miller Racing said, "Hey, you know what we should do? We should join LMP2." I was very confused when reading that IMSA tweet that announced some of the new entries
I
for
think they
next
have
year.
been like teasing it or rumoring it for a while actually. Like I think they had made a tweet or something like a couple months back, if I recall. So
Yeah,
like it wasn't too out of the blue, but I guess it might be more out of the blue if like you don't keep up with some stuff as much as others.
yeah. I was just about to say, in Pratt Miller Motorsports, as much hard as I try, they basically never show up on my Twitter feed. I usually have to actively go looking during race weekends for their tweets. So maybe that was why I missed it. Or it's possible that my brain wrote it off as a joke tweet because they have the big yellow Corvettes to deal with. So I, again, I would love to have been the fly on the wall for whatever prompted this. It seems very left field to me. But I mean, it's again, like I always say, if they have the capacity to do it, then certainly do it. But it also, in the back of my mind, it does have me wondering if perhaps this could signal the beginning of the end of Pratt Miller effectively prepping and running the Corvettes. So I guess we'll have to see. Um, but now jumping into the top class, it is looking increasingly like Lambo is going to run two of the S63 V8s, or SC63 rather. S63 is a different thing. But two of the SC63s in IMSA, which is, again, that's cool because they just ran one, and that was after they joined for Sebring last year, if I remember correctly. Or Sebring this year, sorry.
It was
Um,
Sebring this year and then
yeah.
with one car only at endurance rounds.
hmm So running two cars is a step, and now I guess the next question is if they're going to run the full season or not.
I mean, I would hope that they would run the full season, um, instead of just endurance rounds like they did this year. And then, like, to be honest, some of this also is like some fallout from like WEC's decision to do the two-car mandate thing. So they're choosing to just do one series or the other, which, I think that's fine. That's valid. It probably would behoove them to just focus on one series and just that one series for now until they've figured everything out at least. However, like it does mean that they're not at Le Mans, which is kind of it, it's a choice. I mean, I don't know. That's technically a sacrifice they're making currently. Is they're not they're running. They might be running two cars in IMSA and also doing the whole season, but they're not at Le Mans, which is a pretty significant race that everybody wants to be in. Everybody wants to like run. So
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Certainly the economics of that I obviously have no real knowledge of. But but I mean, hey, if it works, it works. And I mean, in truth be told, it's kind of what we had talked about when WEC had announced effectively the 2-car mandate is that it was going to potentially create some issues down the line, and lo and behold, that's exactly what it's doing. So there you go. Um, but moving on into one last bit of sort of individual driver news, is that Philippe Albuquerque is fleeing the HRC nest, as it were. Um, yeah, he's bouncing. I don't remember seeing if he had said where he was gonna end up. I'm assuming probably Cadillac. That would make the most sense.
I feel like he'll probably just still be with Wayne Taylor Racing and just be in like a Cadillac.
Hmm. Yeah, it was kind of what I was thinking, but yeah, but certainly an interesting piece of information. So sort of chewing on and digest that however you see fit. But moving on to the actual Petit Le Mans uh, weekend. So, of course, first off, as we start off with the qualifying, and so to start off with GTP, the Action Express Racing, the Wayland Engineering Cadillac was on pole in GTP. The United Autosport LMP2 would end up on pole there. Rexy in GTD Pro, and the Lone Star Racing Mercedes in just normal GTD, um, which I don't know seems fairly unsurprising for most of these when you look at the broader scope of the season. Um, but with that said, customary question: good race or not?
I mean, I still thought it was a decent race, barring the fact that technically this year's championship fight was not as close as it was last year. Like last year pretty much went into like the final race and people were still fighting for the championship, down to like the final hours too. And really this Petit Le Mans, this race, this season, all the championship leaders had to do was just not fuck up tremendously during the race, and they pretty much had the championship locked down and in the bag. Um, but it still, I thought, was decent. It also wasn't as chaotic as it was last year. At least up until like the final like minutes of the race, there was like some chaos and stuff that happened towards the end, but there wasn't as much like craziness right at the start as opposed to last year.
Yeah, broadly speaking, I'm kind of the same opinion. The fact that you didn't have championship fights that literally went down to the wire this year took a little bit of the wind out of the sails of this particular event. And then just as the race transpired, it was not even accepting that final about hour. Um, it was not even half as chaotic as last year's race was. Um, Last year's was very silly. And while I have mixed feelings about that race too, and we've talked about it, actually feel free to go listen to it. One of our earlier episodes. Um, I do think that one will be remembered as something of a classic. I think, and I don't feel the same about this race.
I mean,
But
this one I thought was pretty good, or at least like the on track battles at least were pretty good. And I'm like, yeah, this is gonna go in the books for like one of the best passes ever, one of the best overtakes ever.
you know
But
what?
I
That's
mean, like,
fair.
I don't know. I thought it was decent. I mean, last year, I don't know. I don't even know about last year because it's like it was just so chaotic and there were so many things that I'm just like, whatever. Like I can't believe this happened, but here we are.
Hmm. But moving on, I guess to sort of the broader race recap. Is that we got our first full course yellow from the pole sitter in GTD, who went off and got it stuck in the kitty litter, which was very funny. Um, later on we had a bit of elbows out racing from the Pfaff McLaren and the Paul Miller BMW, which I mean, fair enough. I can understand being a little angry when you're stuck in a McLaren all the time. That breaks. Speaking of which, did you see that tweet from Nielsen Racing during Petit
Yeah,
about?
because like McLaren Racing had tweeted like, "Oh, there's no racing this weekend," and then I don't know what they said, but it was like basically talking about how like terrible the McLaren GT cars are.
Which I'm like, whew, that is a decision from whoever runs that account. Tweet's still up too. It's very funny. Um, but um, but
There's
we
a
would
lot
have.
of tweets that actually are like questionable, like not even from them, but like from other like Twitter admins of some race teams that I'm like, I'm so shocked that this is still up.
Yeah, I know. It's well, I mean, we've talked about it before, like racing and like all of the various interpersonal relationships and racing. It's so messy.
Like, there's a Turner Motorsports tweet where they were talking about like a Diddy party or something at the Indy race, and I'm like, I screenshot it because I was so sure that within like hours or like at least an hour that that tweet was going to be deleted given like the circumstances of like what was going on at the time. But like I think it's still up to this day, and I'm like, whoa, man! Like who runs this account?
Yeah, yeah, it's wild. Again, unserious is probably the best word for it. But but yes, we would get the second full course yellow when the number two, the United Autosports LMP2, and the number 4 Corvette um, came together, which is annoying. Um,
Oh, the Nilsson Racing tweet says in response to like McLaren, it's like no wonder all the IMSA teams are dropping the 720.
hmm Yeah, which is just that is what a wild thing to say. I mean, it's not wrong, but Jesus Christ. Uh, but yes, the number 66 Acura, the Gradient racing car, would bring out a full course yellow for spinning and just stalling, albeit briefly, basically in the middle of the circuit, which is obviously a bit spooky. Um, then the number 70 Ferrari would go for a spin coming out of effectively the final corner, that kind of downhill kink section, which is, well, I've spun many a times there on Sims, so it makes me feel less bad. Um, but we would have a little bit more GT on LMP2 violence when the number 45 Lamborghini and the number 11 LMP2 came together. And throughout all of this, we had a curious thing happen, which I thought was very, very funny. Um, our overall pole sitter and the pole sitter for GTP, the number 31 Cadillac, would overtake under yellow flag conditions and then would immediately get busted for it. I I mean, I can appreciate trying. I mean, I guess it's the racing equivalent of like stealing a base in baseball. But the issue is that unlike in baseball, where if you can get away with it, it is actively encouraged. In racing, it is not. And then there's all kinds of telemetry and data that race control has to make sure that these kinds of things don't happen. Um,
Also, there was like I didn't even put it. At least I think I did put it with the Cadillacs. I feel like despite the fact that I guess spoiler the '01 did win the race, like there was still a lot of silliness that went on with the Cadillacs this race for whatever reason. Because like you had that. There was also this was also not the this is the first but not the last penalty that the 31 got. And then you had the '01 got black flag for some sort of like technical infringement. I think it was like they said it was like the torque sensor or something, but I'm like, it was just so much going on. with the Cadillacs this race. I'm not entirely sure what was going on there.
Yeah, it was curious. Yes, the amount of Cadillac terrorism we had in this race. Because yes, to your point, the 24 BMW just got annihilated by the 31. Um, and which got caught the 01 in the crossfire, which the 31 got penalized for. But it was just, ooh. But then also we had the GTD Pro Pulsator Rexy suffered some sort of mechanical issue because the car was stopped on circuit for a little bit. But as of that time, they weren't out of like championship contention or anything. But yes, and again, also to your point, a fair few, excuse me, a fair few black flags. The 01 got black flag for sensor reading higher than it should. Yes, a suspected torque sensor. And the FAF McLaren was black flagged as well. Although that was interesting, later rescinded, which is, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
I didn't know even what that was supposed to mean because I remember I saw it pop up on my like the timing and scoring. Then like I saw in like the little like asterisk marks, oh, it was rescinded. So it's like, I don't like what happened. Like they was it like race control decided, oh, actually like we messed up, or like I don't understand.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me, is that somebody, again, watching telemetry, saw something and basically just misinterpreted the data. That's the only thing that makes sense in that instance. Which is wild, given that you would think it would just automatically flag if something was, quotes, out of spec or out of BOP. And so race control wouldn't have to on the fly interpret data like that. But if that's the case, then that explains a lot, if I'm being honest. Huh. Just food for thought. But anyhow, the 25 BMW would end up DNFing, which properly puts pay to my theory. I think last time we did a sports car roundup that maybe BMW had finally turned the corner on this stupid program. The 85, the JDC Miller Motorsports, a banana boat car, dumped as well. Reported power steering failure for that one. The number 31 Cadillac would continue its warpath, where it had contact with the Proton Porsche, the Mustang sampling car, while both of them were just trying to stay on the lead lap at that point, which is like, okay.
I mean, it's kind of funny because you can like see like at least that point in the broadcast, like you could see like both like the 31 and like the 5 like Proton Porsche like frantically driving because like the 6 car I think was like the leader at that time. And it's just like coming like getting aggressively closer in their mirrors, and then they're just like driving like they're literally, you can physically see them fighting for their lives to stay on the lead lap.
Yeah, because I mean, it's worth noting. I don't know if IMSA has put, well, actually, they wouldn't have put a rebroadcast up quite yet, but certainly if you can find some highlights, because it's literally the number, the 31 and the number 5. I mean, literally every corner, they're side by side, practically banging doors, just trying to run away. And yes, you can see one of the Penske Porsches it looms ever closer with like every camera shot. It gets just a little bit closer. It's very funny. Fitting that this takes place in October, because this could be like the theme of like some racing themed like horror movie, where if they get overtaken by the Penske, then like, I don't know, they just explode or something. Yeah, we'll workshop that. Anyway, the number 4 Corvette had further mechanical issues. Good to see that I wasn't the only one a bit confused, because it wasn't really specified what quite happened. It's thought that it was probably some residual issues from clattering into a LMP2. But the car ended up behind the wall for a little bit. Uh, and then one of the Pratt Miller Corvettes, again, I don't know which one this was either. Um, just killed the Heart of Racing Aston Martin. Um, yeah, it just was coming out of the final corner and just dumped him, which is not. If I had a nickel for every time a Corvette got pissy and dumped somebody, I would only have 2 nickels, but it's really odd that it's happened twice. I can't remember if that was at Daytona or Sebring this
It
year.
was Sebring. It down to like one of like the final minutes of the race
Mhm.
where you just had Earl Bamber just straight up like annihilate a GT car. It wasn't even somebody in his own class he was
No,
beefing.
it
He
was
was
yeah, it was just
beefing like a GTD car.
yeah, I
It's
want
a
to say it was one of the
GTD
GT.
Pro, bro.
Yeah, I want to say was it the one of the Lamborghinis or it might have been one of the Ferraris, but yeah. Yeah,
Either
it's like
way, they were promptly victimized.
yes. But yeah, it's just like I said, that is the second time that has happened, and it's very odd. Um, but elsewhere, the number 99 LMP2 had developed a bit of a smoking habit, not great for anyone's health, and I had to pit as a result of that. The '01 Cadillac manages to lose it completely by itself, which was curious, and then the number 12 Lexus also briefly broke, where it just stopped on track. Um, but now here's where things get spicy. So it was about an hour to go, 56 minutes, in fact, and we got a full course yellow for a truly gigantic incident. Um, the number 55 Mustang and the number 120 Porsche got together. However, the Mustang was backwards and stuck. Two things that don't really make sense to me. No, and to its credit, the number 120, the Porsche involved in this incident, was also stopped on track, but it was in a much easier spot to see and avoid. Um, and you had everybody basically had to take evasive action to avoid everybody, and the number 24, the GTP BMW, almost didn't. Um, However, the number 10 Acura, the Wayne Taylor entry, uh, basically it clipped it. It just clipped the front end of the Mustang, and it basically it ripped the side of the Acura open like it was a tin can, except it's carbon fiber, which makes it all the more remarkable that you had that kind of crash damage. Um, and it made an unholy mess that took some time to clean up and sweep up. Yeah, because I can't remember quite where it was on circuit, but it was over one of those kind of blind crests. It might have been at the bottom of the S's, actually. Um, but yeah, no, it's just, I mean, it's a yucky accident in a terrible spot. But it
The
took a little while, but the race would go
the
back.
Wayne Taylor car, the 10 car at least continues at Petit Le Mans.
Oh, yes, that is a good point. Yeah,
It's
because
like
well,
the Wayne Taylor car DNF. It freaking Petit Le Mans, like that's heritage at this point.
it really is. Yeah, no, this has been a bit of a habit with them this last little bit. But yeah, but the race would go green. The 01 Cadillac would overtake the 6, which ended up being the pass for the win. Now, interestingly enough, and this was something I almost texted you about this one, was the headlights went out on the 01. So, because for a while it was just running with one functioning headlight, which through in the wider provision of IMSA rules is completely acceptable. You just need to have at least one functioning headlight, but then the other one went out. And I thought for sure race control was gonna black flag um the 01, and they just didn't. And I struggle to understand quite how that works, given that IMSA is usually pretty hot on the button when it's no lights at night.
I
So
have
this
no idea because, like, I mean, and it was crazy because he went into like turn one with no lights at all, which is like, I watched that back. And it's like, that is like extremely scary because there's like no light at all in turn one.
no.
So, like, it just like all you just see is like the two like red lines that are like the back lights, the rear lights of it, of like the car going into the turn, but that's it. And then like there was also, I don't know, they were also saying on the broadcast how like it was pretty likely that they would black flag them just because like there's also other traffic on the circuit, and GTP cars everybody knows are the quickest cars. So it's like if you're just driving at like 190 and you're trying to navigate traffic, which usually every time you see anybody navigating traffic at night, um, there's people flashing their headlights, but without that, it's kind of like, okay, you're like literally just like a missile moving through the dark and nobody can see you coming. And then they didn't get black flag. I mean, maybe IMSA was waiting to see if they could figure it out before they did it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. Because like you said, the shots of going through T1, flat out with no lights is objectively terrifying. I again, it's one of those things. Is like you said, you when you come down, you've got some lights when you come down that final section, basically the final downhill uh, right hander towards the
Yeah, and
start
then there's
finish straight.
lights on the front stretch, like a little
Hmm.
bit, I think, from like the pit lane and stuff. But after that, it's nothing.
Yeah, it's basically nothing around the rest of the lap. Yeah, it's pretty dark around Road Atlanta at night. Again, it's actually one of my favorite circuits, both to watch and to do like sim stuff on. But yeah, but night it is the idea of not having any lights is terrifying. Um, but yeah, no, they IMSA race controls apparently asleep on the button. They didn't do anything. And in fairness, they were able to get with some coaching was able to get yeah, Ringa was able to get lights back on the car. But
Yeah, it was like some button underneath the dashboard or something. But I mean, it didn't. They still, I guess they got their headlights from Timu or something this past weekend. I don't know. It just I'm shocked that they both went out. Like, okay, one of them going out was like, yeah, okay, that's whatever. Like, I've seen that happen, and it's not really that big of a deal. Or at least in IMSA, it's not a big deal. Other series might think differently about it. And then usually, like, even on like the BMW, like there were plenty of times where like one of the little kidney lights would always go out on like the BMW cars
mhm.
after they've been running for a while. But nothing as crazy as like both headlights going out.
Yeah, exactly. I don't remember the last time in IMSA that a car with neither headlight working happened. I want to say it might have been the Vantage GT car like 10 years ago. That's kind of what my brain is thinking. Um, but but yeah, wild stuff. But despite all of this, the 01 was actually able to notch a victory. Kind of poetic that it would finally win in what is its final race. But still very neat nonetheless. Um, the um, number 11 LMP2 won in class and also claimed the Endurance Cup in LMP2 as well. The Iron Lynx Lamborghini, the number 19, won GTD Pro, and the Conquest Racing Ferrari notched a win in GTD. So, round of applause to all. As for the actual championship winners, you had the Penske Porsche winning in taking the overall championship in GTP. You had the Inter-Europol, which my brain always just wants to say Interpol when I
I'm
read
gonna
that
say
name.
too. I'm like, oh, what? The feds own a fucking race team now.
It would be very funny, but that's what that name makes me think. Um, when I see Inter-Europol, my brain just goes, "Oh, Interpol." But yes, they won the LMP2 championship. The number 77 AO Racing Porsche would win GTD Pro, and the Windward Racing Mercedes in GTD. So again, hey ho's to all. But I guess now for a proper season recap, we did a little bit of chatter kind of in the run up to Petit Le Mans, where we had talked about it a bit. But now that the season is officially over, just I guess overall thoughts on the season and maybe some maybe expectations, just like I said, general kind of recap-ish stuff.
I guess I don't know. Overall thoughts. I guess I thought the season was pretty good overall. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like for IMSA, it takes a lot for me to be like, I completely hated the season. I mean, there were some races that I liked more than others, but overall, I thought it was good.
Yeah, generally, I'm kind of the same mind. I have yet in many, many, many years of watching, what is now IMSA, but all of its, various forms throughout the last, more than 20 years at this point. It's tough for me to really say that there's just been a season that's been outright garbage. Actually, that's not true. When Aston Martin buggered off with the DBR9s in the middle of, what was that, 2008? And effectively left GT. That would have been the very end of GT1 and left it basically uncontested. That wasn't great. But otherwise, yeah, IMSA's usually pretty fun. So yeah, I'm not it's tough for me to be disappointed. But so yeah, overall this was this was a fine season. So I guess now while we've done best race of the season, worst race of the season.
To be honest, I don't really know what would be the worst race of the season. I mean, like, I don't know. I guess maybe like worst race as far as it goes for like how much on track action there is. I was not all that impressed with Laguna Seca this year. I thought that was a pretty lackluster race.
Yeah, honestly, for me, worst race of the season, if you're talking about on track or lack thereof, yeah, probably Laguna Seca. But if you're talking about like actual like racing taking place in the first place, Detroit comes pretty close. It was kind of chaotic this year and in a method in which I don't really enjoy. To be fair, IndyCar was also pretty wild that weekend too. So I don't know. Maybe there's something about that downtown Detroit air that
I think it's just the circuit layout because the circuit layout looks very like it's very much like you get a mix of like Nashville, or at least the street circuit layout of Nashville. You get, you know, you get a little bit of that. You get a little bit of Macau. Like you just get a little bit of everything with that circuit. So like I think that might be what it is the layout. And there are some like tight corners. I mean, we saw like a Long Beach pileup happen that wasn't in Long Beach. Well, one did happen in Long Beach, but then it also somehow transpired and got transported to Detroit as well. But I think it's just the circuit layout, to be honest. It's just kind of janky.
It is a bit, and I mean, and of course, as somebody who, well, lives here, my brain goes, "Well, yeah, of course it is. This is, you're talking about, at this point, probably 100-year-old downtown infrastructure or street layout generally." But, I mean, that doesn't make for a good course necessarily. I still think in some ways it's more entertaining than the old Belle circuit was. But yeah, your mileage may vary.
It might be better if they just like simply made it like a GT only race, like they do with like Virginia International Raceway, how they did before. I think that's what it was before. I think when it was still like the Belle Isle layout it was just GT cars, and then the prototypes were at Mosport. I think they probably should go back and do that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea, to be honest. And it was so funny, with particularly Belle Isle a few years, when Belle Isle was GT only, but a few years, then of course the hometown heroes, the Corvettes, they don't show up because they were preparing for Le Mans. So it was like, well, wow, this is a waste of time.
I mean, it's fun seeing like the GTP cars like weaving in and out between like the cityscapes and stuff, but it's just not functional, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think it is. So again, we'll have to see what happens with that. But yeah, but that was chaotic and in a method that I don't always find fun. So Detroit probably comes I think it shares jointly with Laguna Seca. Yes. So best race of the year?
I don't know. I'll probably give that just to like the Rolex 24 just because I enjoy it so much.
Same. I love generally the whole 36 hours of Sebring, I think is fantastic. So I again, same thing, probably jointly for me. It would probably be those two. Now last episode we talked about, impressive teams and drivers and not so much. So we will so if you're curious for those thoughts, you can hit the last sports car episode we did, which was coincidentally the last episode we did. Back-to-back
I
sports.
still have thoughts.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So for the most like the worst teams or teams that just were not impressive to me, most notably is going to be the 31 Cadillac. Because there were so many times throughout this season that I felt like they should have won, but they just didn't. Like you see them consistently getting pole, like they were quick in qualifying, and they also had genuine pace during races. Like it's not like they were trundling around in the back of the pack all the time. Like they genuinely had pace. It just seemed to be that like every time when it came to race execution, it just wasn't there for whatever reason. Like it would always be, and you see that evident by this Petit Le Mans, where they got pole, but guess what happened during the race? The whole race just fell apart, and like it usually does for them because of silliness, like complete and total silliness, like them getting penalties that they don't need or that they could have easily avoided. Like the passing under like full course yellow. Okay, at this point, I feel like everybody knows that you can't pass under full course yellow. You can't overtake anybody else during full course yellow. Regardless, that is like a pretty much universal rule throughout most racing series is that you can't pass under full course yellow or cautions, whatever, or safety car even. So it's like, I don't get it. And then even like at Sebring, they were also, I feel like, on track to win. But well, we saw what happened there. I mean, they flipped the car and then we're out of contention. And then like pretty much that same thing kind of happened throughout the season. Just a repeat. And I'm just like, it just is genuinely shocking to me that BMW has a win this year, but they don't. Like, I'm like, wow. because I had a tweet in my drafts, and I'm like, I'm really shocked that like Action Express Racing doesn't have a win, but BMW does. Like, I just like that's so crazy. And to be honest, at the beginning of this whole like GTP hypercar era, like if you had told me that that would have been the case, like I would have been genuinely shocked. Honestly, like I probably would have laughed. Like I wouldn't have believed it, to be honest. And then like, despite all like the only race I feel like that that they had minimized like silliness and kept it together was probably the Rolex 24, funny enough. And like, even if, well, we all saw like the race ended early because race control was, they were not locked in. But hey, it probably wouldn't have mattered anyway in that case, because I don't really think they were going to catch the Porsche Penske anyways, but like that was the only race where I can say, in my opinion, that they were genuinely on top of things. But every other race, to be honest, for me, is just like no. Like I just feel like they just were not they couldn't capitalize when I feel like they should have. And then another disappointment would obviously be FAF. Like, I don't know, I feel like they had a massive fall from grace ever since they switched to the McLaren. And I don't know if they're continuing with McLaren next season, but I would hope they're not. I would hope they learn their lesson. Because to be honest, I still feel like they should have just stuck with the Porsche and just thugged it out, for a while. But whatever. Um, and then at least impressive teams. I would say like I was pretty impressed with like the customer Porsche teams. Like I thought they were pretty like they did pretty well in most races, and like it seemed like the only time that they were not really like something went wrong was like a mechanical failure on the car somewhere. It seemed to be less of like an issue that happened with one of the drivers, like like a skill issue per se, but they seem to be pretty on top of things, at least for most of like both like JDC Miller and the Proton Porsche. Like I was pretty impressed with their performance throughout like the season.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's funny, especially as we've been kind of going. Well, it feels like this episode we've been dogging on the McLarens a bit, but for what it's worth, I don't know what prompted Faf to switch in the first place
It was
because
the
they.
BOP because it was like I
Oh,
remember
that's right.
there was really like a whole like meltdown thing that had happened at the Rolex 24 like last year
Uh
where
huh.
it was like, oh, like the BOP was really terrible on the Porsches, and it was like the Porsches, like the GT cars at least, like they had qualified like I don't know, like mid pack or something. And it was kind of crazy because it was like you're telling me that all these people had like terrible laps and just like weren't on it for like the whole season or like the whole race or whatever. It's like it was kind of hard to believe that that was what was going on, and like the Porsches were just slow that whole race. And then even like Sebring was, I think, when most of it came to a head, when I think like Porsche themselves were threatening to like withdraw from the event altogether if IMSA didn't allow them to like change like the BOP or adjust it, because I think it came down to like all they needed was like I don't know, like 2 or 3 more millimeters of like a wing adjustment or something like that, in order for them to be competitive. And like again, there were a lot of teams I think that were threatening to withdraw from the event because they felt like there wouldn't be any benefit to being in the race and basically just trundling around at the back, not being able to be competitive. Um, but I'm pretty sure it was that whole thing is what prompted it, and then it just didn't really work.
Yeah, because what I was leading to, I had forgotten about the BOP debacle with the Porsches last year, but was just that also the McLarens were pretty garbage too. So I'm not really sure how anybody thought that that was a an upgrade going forward. But
McLaren's got to be like the worst GT car currently.
yes, and by a significant margin too. because when they don't brake, they're slow, and well, they're always slow, but then they brake a lot, which is a shame because I think the McLaren's a cool looking car, but he's no good. But yes, but otherwise, certainly my thoughts from most and least impressive teams and what have you, teams and drivers, hasn't really changed since when we went over this in the run up to Petit Le Mans. So if you're curious for my thoughts, then by all means go listen to last episode. Um, but expectations for next year. Again, we talked about this a little bit, but with the season having officially wrapped up and so on, any thoughts?
I mean, I don't really have any at the moment. I mean, it might change as soon as like there's more like silly season stuff that gets sorted out, but I don't know. I don't have that much.
Yeah.
I don't really know yet.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, we went over this. We talked about this last episode, so go listen to that. But yes, certainly as you get silly season stuff, we will almost certainly do an episode or two devoted to silly season in IMSA between now and when Daytona rolls around next year. So do stay tuned for that. And given that we still don't have quite a full picture. We've had some announcements, but are we gonna take a shot at sort of driver lineups and quite what we think those might be, or is that something
Yeah,
that
I made like a little like Google sheet for like some of my predictions. I
okay?
can send it to you so we can
Yep,
look at it.
yeah. By all means, let's have a look and let's see if we can unpick this together. Let's get Twitter open, but because yes, to my earlier point, we like I said, driver lineups haven't been finalized yet. So we are just kind of a bit of a shot in the dark for certainly what we've got going on. But with that, so yes, let's have a look here. So yeah, we've got some endurance rounds. Kennedy Felipe, that's interesting. What is this? Ah, yeah. So yeah, so sort of looking at what we've got here for what we've got going on. Ah, Ring of Xander. Yeah, so are these looks like most of these are effectively finalized from certainly from what I can tell.
I mean, some of these, like, I don't know, like they're just I just put like the Meyershank Racing lineup in green because like that's been finalized. The
Mhm.
other ones, like I have no idea.
Sure.
I'm just guessing.
Okay. Yeah. Certainly a lot of these they make sense looking at like the Iron Links, Caldarelli, Cairoli and Grosjean. Although of course Grosjean would only be for the endurance rounds. Having Pipo Derani at Heart of Racing is that feels like some bizarro world stuff, but I would actually genuinely love to see it.
I feel like he would probably be in WEC to be honest with their program over there, because I don't
Mhm.
know if like they were. I think they might be looking for like I don't know a more experienced driver that's like kind of like a foundation or like an anchor for like the program initially. So I feel like he might be a good choice to be honest. And like since he's not with GM anymore, it probably could be likely.
Mhm. Yeah. Um excuse me. Looking over some of the other stuff. Let's see.
Because like the other big thing is like who's gonna replace Yellowly at the BMW or the 25 BMW?
Yeah, that's a good question. We got Cara Connor, we've got oh, Dan Harper. That's interesting. And yeah, it's interesting that you point that out because have we seen much crossover between WRT and RLL up to this point?
Like very little. Like I think this year they had they had Augusto Farfus on one of the lineups for the BMW. I think it was like the 25, and then they had Dries Vantor on like the other one. So like that's probably like the only crossover that I've seen so far, at least for the prototype program.
Hmm.
They did have, I think Paul Miller Racing had Sheldon Vanderland for the Rolex for that one time, but that's the GT car. But other than that, I haven't really seen much crossover.
Yeah, so that could be kind of a fun thing to see. And looking at Action Express, Aiken, Bamber, and Frederick Vesti. That'd be fun. Yeah, this is actually these proposed lineups are kind of are actually kind of fun. It'd be interesting to see quite how many of these ultimately come to fruition. So, and I'm looking at one. I see it looks like you've got Colton Herta in the 40, Wayne Taylor racing, which and it's funny with the Andretti connection that makes sense, but my brain goes, what about the powertrain stuff?
Oh,
Because
I
of
think
course,
they dropped the Andretti connection
oh,
because
did
I
they?
think when I looked on the list, the entry list, it doesn't say like Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti anymore.
Interesting.
Which
That
I
was
think could have been because of that whole thing with Michael Andretti stepping down from like his role at Andretti, and I think that's when they dropped it. I just thought
uh
it just one day just dropped, and I'm like, huh, that's interesting.
interesting. Okay. Yeah, because my brain was thinking because of course Andretti is aligned with Honda in IndyCar, but then of course you've got, the GM powertrain connection with, running Cadillac, obviously. Um, and so my brain goes, given that, GM then with Chevy on the engine side and IndyCar, I mean, they're direct rivals. I know that there's because, again, we've talked about it before, endurance racing is a bit of a melting pot when it comes to, manufacturers, powertrains, drivers, what have you. So I know that the OEMs tend to be generally are less difficult about it. But my brain wonders if that could potentially be a problem.
I mean,
So
it might be. I don't know. I mean, everybody seems to believe that he's gonna be like in the Cadillac. I mean, I don't know if everybody else is getting super hyped up about it has considered that yet, but maybe they have, maybe they haven't. Because yeah, it just says on the entry list Cadillac Wayne Taylor Racing V Series R. So
mhm.
like it doesn't say the Andretti part anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, that's like the most quiet thing to do if that is indeed the case, to drop that like that. But yeah, but that was the first thing that popped into my head, and then, like I said, basically everybody else, makes sense. Um, Alexander Rossi for the Rolex, for the 10 could be fun.
Yeah, because he was in the McLaren, the FAF McLaren, I think, for the
Mhm.
Rolex this year, which made sense because he was with McLaren in IndyCar. But now that he's not with McLaren anymore, um, I guess technically, I don't know. McLaren was a Chevy team, I think, still.
Yes.
So technically, he does have some GM connection, so it could work, or there's no conflict of interest there. So
Yeah,
and
but
I think he was like when Wayne Taylor Racing, they used to be with Cadillac in the DPI era. I think he did uh do races with them. I think he was at like Petit like a couple years back with Wayne Taylor Racing. So he'd basically just be coming back home.
Yeah, effectively. So yeah, and that's why I was saying why that one makes perfect sense for, some of the, marquee events if Alex wanted to tag along with, and of course it not being a conflict with IndyCar. Um, although given that he'll be poodling around at the back of the grid with ECR moving forward, who knows? Maybe he'll have more time. Anyway, let's see, kind of having a look at some of these other ones. Yeah, it's interesting that Meyer Shank not having having Elia in one of the cars, given
I
how
mean, I
long.
guess we don't know yet. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it could be like a couple weeks later or
Mhm.
a month later, month or two later. They're just like surprised Elio's joining us again for the Rolex 24 or something, and we bust out Simon Pagno again or something. I don't know how his recovery's been going, but I don't know, that could happen. I think some people were thinking or speculating that it would be like Rosenquist would possibly do it because I think he had some prototype experience, I think. So it could work. Or even like I think Alex Pillow or like Scott Dixon, since they're both in Honda, like Chip Ganassi Racing is Honda, like they have Honda and IndyCar. So like no conflict of interest, and maybe possibly Marcus Armstrong like further down the line. I think he would have to get more sports car racing experience and specifically prototype racing experience first to be able to do that, but it's possible.
Yeah, yeah, because I noticed that because, like I said, more often than not, Elio joins for the Rolex 24. So I was like, they're not gonna cart out old man Elio. Um, which, like I said, I say that with nothing but love because he's been him like Scott Dixon and so many of these other guys has genuinely been a fixture of like my whole life in motorsports. So yeah, the day that some of these guys really hang up the helmet for good, uh, I will be much sad. Um, but yeah, well, like I said, kind of perusing through these lists. This is certainly this was very fun. I guess actually let me get to the big one. Given you have just two question marks for the banana boat Porsche, there's not even an attempt at a prediction here. So
Because I'm like, both customer Porsche teams, I have literally no clue what could possibly go on there because like a lot of like the customer teams, at least the customer Porsche teams, like they don't necessarily have people who are like factory drivers in like these cars. So it literally could be anybody. They could bring in the same people that they had this year for all intents and purposes. I'm just assuming Timon Vanderhelm would probably be back because well, I think he's like only like 19 or something, and he did pretty well this year. So I feel like why not? Um, both lineups. I have no idea. It's like why not? I think so. Some of it's like maybe placeholders. And Nico Mueller, I'm like I feel like that's plausible because he is a Porsche factory driver now, and I feel like he would probably start off with being in a customer Porsche first before like any of the like the factory outfits, but I don't know. At least for the Rolex, probably.
yeah, yeah, it's fair. But yeah, like you said, but you're absolutely right. The customer teams are kind of all over shot. So yeah, it would be curious to know where they ended up with. And correct me if I'm hallucinating this or not. It feels like there's so much news these days that I kind of forget where. But aren't one of the current customer Porsche teams switching chassis manufacturers? Was it Proton?
Oh, yeah, it's not an IMSA but WEC. It's Joda. Joda's a customer
Ah,
Porsche
that was what I
team,
was
and
thinking of.
they're
Yep.
switching to Cadillac.
Yep, that was what it was. Because everyone was like, wait a minute. Yep. Okay, there you go.
Which not all of those drivers that they have there are supposed to be continuing with Joda. So like I don't know, maybe they could come here. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, that'll be curious to see. Um, But yeah, I knew it was something. It was just wasn't thinking of the right series. Like I said, so much news these days that it gets a little tough to keep track. But yeah, but this is a fascinating list, and it'll be curious. Like I said, a lot of these truths be told do make sense. It'll be curious to see quite as we get closer to Daytona. It'll be curious to see quite how many of these turn out to be solid or not.
I mean, the I think I'm pretty confident with most of them, but to be honest, they could just there could be a curveball, to be honest, because there've been plenty of things, plenty of signings that have happened this year across motorsports that I just didn't expect. So there could be just things coming out of left field. Some of this is like based off of like my own guesses and then also some stuff that I've been reading. So I'm like, there's some truth to it, but some of it's also just me waffling. Because I mean, somebody was like thinking that they would bring in like Valentino Rossi for one of like the BMW prototypes, or at least for like the Rolex 24. But I'm like, I think even that would be a long shot.
It would be super cool, don't get me wrong, but that would never happen. But but yes, this is neat. So yeah, so we'll have to see what happens here, but certainly I guess watch this space because it feels like like you said, anytime anybody tries to do driver predictions, it goes all horribly awry because then you have some blockbuster signing or what have you. but um but on that note, this has been another episode of Chicanery. And until next time, everybody, thanks for listening.